Big, huge news today at Blue White Illustrated. We are welcoming Sean Fitz, the one and only Sean Fitz, to the podcast. We're going to talk some Penn State football. We're going to talk practice this week. And of course, we're going to talk about Ohio. All of that coming up in a minute on the Blue White Illustrated Daily Edition. Fitz!
Buddy.
Fitz! Oh my goodness.
I appreciate that intro. I'm not sure it's completely necessary. But no, I appreciate it. It's good to see you. My good friend of many, many years, finally together on a podcast. We've talked about this for a long time. And it's been something I'm really looking forward to. I've always wanted to see your shiplap. Those are, I can confirm, your kids in the background there. It's not just a random, But anyway.
Beautiful.
But I'm happy to do this. Nate is incredible at what he does. I don't know that he's ever gotten the recognition that he deserves. I don't know that he's ever gotten anything that, that anybody, could say that he's among the best to do it. I will say this. If you get a chance, and this is all flattery to you, I don't want any of this back. If you get a chance, go back to August, read his stuff through camp. Nobody more accurate. If you were watching Thursday, he was beaming because everything that he said in August came to fruition. He did an amazing job. The whole staff here at Blue White Illustrated does an amazing job, and I'm ecstatic to be here. Sorry I missed on Tuesday. I had some other stuff that I had to take care of. I'll be back with a recruiting show with Ryan on Tuesdays that I'm looking forward to as well. But for now, the big show Thursday. Nate, I'm psyched.
Sean, it's one. I mean, now I'm blushing.
That does not take much.
I can't come back from that. But two, hopefully in the future we'll be able to move this to Chick-fil-A, as we've always dreamed of doing. But for the time being, let's chat some Penn State football. We obviously Penn State coming off of a win against Purdue at Purdue last Thursday night to open the season. James Franklin back on Tuesday, did a press conference. Wednesday, we were at practice. Just wanted to run through some of your thoughts about, kind of what we saw this week or what we've seen so far this week.
We'll start with the newsworthy stuff. I mean, we were at practice last night. There were some questions we had going in. You think back to the last drive of the game on defense last week, and Jaylen Reed went down with what looked like could be anything. He grabbed the back of his right leg, I believe it was. But he was back at practice last night, which is a big deal because that safety position, as good as we think it can be, it's going to be that with four guys. It's going to be those guys running through Keaton Ellis and Jair Brown, of course, starting. Zakee Wheatley, who's a guy that, in reaching out to program sources this week, thought he played probably better than I think his PFF grade was pretty low. But of course, Jaylen Reed gives you so many options back there. So to see him out there running around, didn't look like anything was really bothering him. Of course, I'm sure he's being monitored, but it's an encouraging sign to see Jaylen Reed back out there once again. Kazai Izzard and Smith Vilbert, the two defensive linemen that did not make the trip to Purdue, kind of cast off to the side a little bit. James Franklin was asked about that on Wednesday night afterward. He provided no context to it whatsoever. We've talked a little bit about it on the Lions Den message board. What's going on there. But those guys seem like they're out of the picture for now. And then, going back to the injury situation, of course, Penn State doesn't talk about injuries, but noticeable absence last night with Theo Johnson not on the practice field. So I think you can see a tight end rotation, or can expect to see a tight end rotation similar to what we saw last week. And if this goes the way Penn State hopes it goes, maybe a little bit more Khalil Dinkins in there as well at tight end. But that's newsworthy stuff from practice this week. It's always good to get that out there. I see these guys on the field. They were inside last night because some storms moved through, but pretty cut and dry, typical practice for Penn State.
Yeah, and I think it actually kind of plays well into what might be, or at least in my mind, and I could be way off here, but seems to be the theme of this week. Relating back to last year and how many missed opportunities Penn State had in terms of developing its depth, right? And so you look at some of those absences or potential absences that you just talked about, Jaylen Reed, Kazai Izzard, Smith Vilbert, maybe Theo Johnson. All of those are at positions where there are other players, right? Depth players who I think we're all kind of anxious to see. right? Like to get a taste for them of college football, right? And so I think that for all of the chances that Penn State missed last year to get things right in terms of developing its depth, James Franklin's been talking about it all offseason, right? I mean, he talked about it even last year, just talking about the schedule and how the schedule didn't allow for it in some circumstances. And then on top of the schedule itself, how when they did have opportunities against some, quote unquote, lesser than type teams, they didn't take advantage of those, right? They found themselves in tighter games than they would have liked in the third and fourth quarter. So no, it's all going to be very, very interesting for Penn State this week to be able to get over the top and take advantage of some of those opportunities, on top of the fact that, as you just said, some of those guys might be missing from action. How about Tuesday? Oh, sorry.
I mean, going back to your point, it's the simplest common denominator that keeps going back. You need to put up points, and you need to put up points early. Can't have this slow start, this thing. I mean, you look at them struggling against even Villanova last year. You've got to work those things out, and you've got to get your reps, but you want to finish, and you want to get your other guys in there. You're talking about getting guys, if Jaylen Reed, if you're watching him come along and maybe monitoring him. Sorry, I'm a little rusty. KJ Winston's a guy you look to. I mentioned Khalil Dinkins. Some of those young defensive linemen can get in there, especially defensive end. I thought Amin Vanover, going back to the Purdue game, gave you something there. So that was good to see tonight. Dennis Sutton. So you want to see as many bodies as possible, but you're only going to get there if you put the points up in the first half. And that's just been something that they've struggled with and stalled on several times in the last couple of years. I mean, it's just one of those things that they've got to, step on the gas and really not take it lightly. And I'm not saying they don't take it lightly, but you've seen games where Penn State will come out and try to get their rotations in on the first and second drive of the game, because they think the game plan or the blueprint is they're going to, win by a lot. Hopefully this weekend, from Penn State's perspective, they're able to do that, and they're able to do it effectively. You mentioned James on Tuesday. Situational football, a big deal. I know that's your number one takeaway from James' press conference on Tuesday. This was really one of those things where you look at him, his coaching record, the criticism on him. Did a pretty good job against Purdue. I'm still think that we're underselling that win against Purdue. I think it's going to be a solid, probably 9-win team. On the road, you're trying to break things in. It's not as impressive as you would hope to have been, but still, you're a 3.5-point favorite. You won by 4. Seems to line up. So situational football, the middle 8, the 2-minute drill, all that kind of stuff is really where they shone on Thursday night. And it was really impressive to see that all come together so quickly.
Yeah, I just thought that it wasn't a straightforward game, right? I mean, you can look at it from a couple of different perspectives, and obviously Penn State fans, to a certain extent, I think it's fair to say they were aghast at blowing a lead, right? That was probably the argument is, Penn State had a good lead. Sean Clifford goes out. They stall offensively in the third quarter. They don't really do anything. Purdue comes back with a touchdown and then ultimately is able to get that pick 6. And it's just like, a game that looked like Penn State was going to win all of a sudden vanished. But lost in translation for all of that is Penn State ended up doing all of the things that it needed to do to win. All of the clutch situation, like all of those big focal points in the game when it all right? Maximizing that last possession in the first half after the turnover, right?
Beyond maximize. I mean, that's one where you either take a knee or you miss a field goal, something like that. I mean, absolutely. Correct. I mean, you think about it, it goes back to Penn State scored 35 points, which we've been waiting for them to score points for a couple of years now. But at the same time, they lost the explosive play battle. To score 35 points and not have those big time plays, that's a positive sort of. I think there's elements to a good team here. I don't think it's a good team yet, but I think you saw some things shining through that really gives you some encouragement moving forward, especially with the schedule.
Well, T. Frank and I talked about it yesterday a little bit. How many of those explosive plays that didn't happen looked as though they might? Right? It didn't appear to me to be a situation where, again, your running backs are getting gang tackled and your receivers don't have any opportunities to break one big. They did, and they might not have cashed in on all of those this time. Some drops that would have been huge. Obviously, the PFF counted 5 drops among the receivers and the tight ends. Yeah, I mean, it just felt like to me, and Sean Clifford talked about it a little bit last night. There were lots of chances that maybe they didn't happen, but he accredited that to some first game jitters, some of the noise he called it, all of the stuff that goes on in that first game on the road in a tough environment. I think it just blends right into what we're talking about this week with Ohio of, hey, those things that might have happened or that seemed like they were close to happening last week probably will happen this week.
Yeah.
they're going to cash in a little bit more this week than they did last.
Yeah. And we'll downplay it because it's Ohio, because that's what we do. I mean, it was interesting to see the reaction. It's like we've never seen a week 1 before. I mean, Sean Clifford even said it on Wednesday night, talking about you think back to the first half of the Wisconsin game last year. I mean, putrid, just absolutely terrible. So at least you got your offense going. At least you got some things going. I know it's a different front seven. It's a different defense, Wisconsin and Purdue. But I mean, there's some encouragement to be taken from that. I mean, you can't throw everything at them and hope something sticks that early. So, and I'm just curious, you mentioned about those big plays that were just close to happening and probably can happen against a MAC team versus a Big Ten athlete. I mean, that's kind of how things have played out historically, not always, but we're going to talk about Ohio in a little bit, but I'd like to know the collective reaction on Nick Singleton's first carry when he breaks through the line. I mean, that there's some people out of their recliners quit. I know I was like, oh, here it goes. Because I had joked around with people this summer. When does Nick Singleton get going? I was like, well, he'll take a 70-yard run, 80-yard run against Purdue in the first game, and that could have been a 90-yard. So it's encouraging to see that. Hopefully, for Penn State's sake, we see that, and I think that's really what we get into as we preview Ohio. And you don't take any team lightly. It's very hard to win a football game. I think that's something that, given with the watching dominant teams do dominant things, it's lost on some college football fans. I know video games play into it, things like that. But you don't think about the depth situation. And this is something that you harped on Wednesday night after talking with James Franklin. How do you talk about getting guys into the game without getting that lead? It's very tough to do, but we're going to do it anyway. I think everybody is looking at these guys like Drew Allar. We got a glimpse of him last week, saw some really, really good things from him, saw that, he's not a finished product by any means. But I think we're going to see a little bit more of him this week. And I'm really excited to see him throw the football, really excited to see him at home, be a little bit more comfortable, do some things. I think the world of this kid as a prospect, as again, not a finished product by any means necessary or by any means at all. But just an exciting, and how often can you say that? We talk so much about Sean Clifford fatigue, and it's a real thing. And you judge that, or you see that by the way that you judged his game last week, which was not a bad game. Horrible mistake with that pick 6, but that's what you get with the Sean Clifford experience. Man, I think people are ready for a fresh set of eyes on a fresh set of quarterbacks. There's a good quarterback room. Sean Clifford spoke to that on Wednesday night, and I'm just excited to see what the kid can do because, I'll be honest with you. The last time we saw him was in the All-American game, outside of the blue-white game in a real live situation. Not that that's a real life situation, but he struggled at times. He came in and threw some dimes the other night, and it was really encouraging to see. So hopefully you can get a couple series under his belt, make him feel comfortable and really see what you have there moving forward.
Assuming that Penn State wins on Saturday and the way that Thursday worked out, we weren't planning on talking about this, but I think that we should. This is, I think, as perfect of a situation as Penn State could have asked for Drew Allar, right? To start the season, to engage him, to have him playing, to get reps, meaningful reps, obviously on Thursday, but coming up this weekend, if it appears to be the depth rotation that it was in the first week, where Allar is number 2 and Bayer is still number 3, it's great for him. It gets him involved. It makes him feel as though he's making progress. It gets him critical reps towards the future. I just think that certainly you don't want any absences or anything to happen to the rest of the room. But if you do have a chance to engage this kid at this early stage in his career, I just think it works out very, very well for Penn State. After the quarterbacks, I think both of us have a little bit of a list of guys who, and let's frame this correctly. The starters are going to start. The starters are going to play. They're going to be tasked with building a lead, with obviously winning the game, but building a lead and creating the type of cushion that allows for you to bring in backups and younger depth players. Who are you looking forward to seeing on Saturday that isn't at the top of the depth chart, but is probably pushing there in the second and third teams?
I'm really, really hoping to see more than one play of Abdul Carter. This is a guy that you and I talked about on Wednesday night. Everything there from a physical aspect. I'm curious to see how he, Ohio does a lot of play action. Ohio does a lot of, the handoff, the zone read stuff. I'm curious to see how he handles it. I really think that he's going to get an opportunity to take expanded reps. And that's not just wait until Penn State gets the lead. I think we'll see him out there. We saw him out there against Purdue in a tight game. So Abdul Carter tops my list. I think he topped your list as well. And I think I stole that one. So apologies. We're still working on the chemistry here, I know. But Abdul Carter, man, just excited to see what he can bring to the table, because if you talk to anybody in the program, they, sort of give a whistle and say, this kid's special. And I'm excited to see that come to fruition for more than one play.
Yep, no doubt. Running backs, Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. And very clearly we saw them early and often in that Purdue game, but they kind of got away from the run in the second half of that game. And so more opportunities.
It was the thing to do.
Yeah, it's following trends. So I think that more of Nick Singleton, more of Kaytron Allen. Does Kevon Lee need to do a whole lot in this game if Penn State has a lead? Probably not. And so I think that there might be an opportunity for those guys. Certainly James Franklin said on Wednesday night that it's going to remain a 1-to-1-to-1 situation, but I don't know if I necessarily believe that if there is an opportunity for Penn State to build a little bit of a lead. On the offensive line, I want to see Drew Shelton. There are questions abound. I think that you've mentioned them before this week. Tackle, who knows, right? It could be a little bit of a situation for this offensive line. And we knew that coming into the season. But if Drew Shelton is able to do what he did through the summer, where he impressed throughout, pushed during preseason camp, this could be an opportunity for Penn State fans, and certainly for us as the media, to be able to get to see him in action and see whether or not he is a viable stand-in. If something happens to Olu Fashanu, is Drew Shelton the guy, or do they have to shuffle things around? So that's something I want to see. I know you talked on the other side of the line, defensively. There are a couple of guys that you're looking forward to too.
Yeah, and I'll go back to what you said there for a second. We're not looking for Drew Shelton to unseat anybody. We're looking to see if he can play. I mean, Sean was talking last night about the quarterback room, and he's like, it wasn't a dig at Taquan Roberson, but it was very clear that they were not prepared last year at Iowa. I think everybody knows that. I'm not breaking any news here, but to hear Sean Clifford admit that to everyone, you're looking at trying to build that quarterback room from top to bottom, really. I mean, you were looking last year at one guy's up here, the rest is down here. Now you've got a little bit more of a grade there. So that's nice to see. The running backs, give me a big run. Give me one where you're sitting in the south end zone. You see that hole open and you see number 10 or whoever just take off. That's been sorely missing for a long time in this running game. Going back to what you said, Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant are going to have a chance to be active. They're going to have a chance to get reps, especially against a smaller offensive line, an Ohio team that is a MAC offensive. I think it's a decent offensive line in the MAC, but you should be able to impose your will. You should be able to be physically better. I know these guys are freshmen, but they bring something special to the table there. So Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, two guys that not a surprise that I'm watching them closely, because I the man crush is strong with both of those, but very, very encouraged, or very, very anxious to see how those guys go. Like I said, I'm rusty. I apologize for that. And then finally, Jake Pinniger, the kicker. You asked why I had him on this list. We didn't see him last week outside of extra points. Hopefully, we see him on a lot of extra points. We don't see him for a lot of field goals, but that's something that they're going to need to work on in a game situation at some point. Up and down throughout his career, up and down in practice before the season when we saw him. But he's won that job, and they seem to trust him. And you'd rather him take the kicks now against Ohio than go to Auburn or have to do it against Ohio State to try to get loose.
Totally. How I didn't mention this, but how about that Barney and Moore? Really passed the test. You were on the Bacchetta train, and I don't know. Doesn't matter. Anyway,
no, it's fantastic. I love specialists. I'm a big long snapper guy myself, but Barney and Moore, win the job against a scholarship guy. Come out and do that. I talked to Jordan Stout this week, who was just over the moon for him. And yeah, you've got some more success in that transfer portal to flaunt to prospective targets.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna look ahead to Ohio in a minute, but before we get to that, we're gonna tell people how they can get to and into that game. Have you been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets? Jim at tixmanjim.com, formerly at psutixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchase is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your home opener, Ohio U, and Ohio State Stripeout, Minnesota Homecoming Whiteout tickets now. Go to www.tixmanjim.com or email Jim directly at tixmanjim@gmail.com or call 302-521-8380. You can see it on your screen, the web address right there. Take advantage. Great guy to work with, and is able to hook you up with all of your Penn State football ticket needs. Now that we know how Penn State fans can get to the game, let's talk about what they're going to see, right? You were able to check out some Ohio film. And when I say film, I mean, is it film?
It was the game against FAU.
Okay.
Was the ESPN copy. I did not watch the all 22 on Ohio. I know T. Franksel, is trying to get a hold of that with all his.
He wants it.
He wants it so bad. But a 41-38 win against FAU last weekend. They trailed at the half. They gave up 21 fourth quarter points, still managed to pull it out. Head coach Tim Albin, 3-9 last year in his first season. A bit of an anomaly. Frank Solich did such a good job with that program for a long time. They went to 10 bowl games from 2009 to 2019. A veteran team, experienced team, 9 super seniors. He highlighted 22 seniors. So they've got some experience. I mean, it's a pretty typical MAC team, but that's kind of what you get in these out of conference games. They start 2 Pennsylvania kids. Bryce Raymer plays guard from Beaver, and Parker Titsworth from North Allegheny. So a couple of Pittsburgh kids starting on the offensive line for Ohio. Start with the defense. They've got a new defensive coordinator, Spence Nowinski from Miami, Ohio, plays a 4-2-5. A lot of hybrid stuff in there. So kind of looks like a 4-3, depending what kind of personnel they've got. I've got a ton of experience there with the front 7, all seniors on the defensive line, and that 2 deep is pretty well loaded with seniors. It's a group that can be moved off the ball, so it's an opportunity for Penn State to try and run the ball. Albin was focused this week on cleaning up tackling. It was the first week. I mean, everybody struggles to tackle in the first week, let's be honest. Yep. But they really struggled tackling at times. They had some communication issues with tempo. But the defense kind of settled in and then let it get away at the end with those 21 fourth quarter points. Free safety hybrid Ben Johnson was their leading tackler. They play 2 safeties back on top to try and take some things away, and then they tighten up in the red zone. So you're coaching a little bit because you are the lesser of the 2 athletic teams. But this is a defense that I think Penn State can be able to move around and can be able to score upon at times.
Yeah, quarterback from FAU threw 5 touchdowns. So if Sean Clifford, Drew Allar aren't licking their chops today, and look, like Penn State's receivers too, right? Especially after that performance on Thursday, where they made some big plays, right? Keandre Lambert-Smith. It's going to continue to be a point of conversation until some of these guys demonstrate and prove consistency, right? We've been talking about it all offseason, but that's just the next step that they need to take. And it seems like Ohio represents a solid opportunity for Penn State to be able to get some firm footing there. Right. How about the offensive side of the ball? This quarterback looks real. Yes.
Yeah, he is a real person. Curtis Rourke, the Maple Missile, as they called him last week, MAC East Player of the Week, 27 of 34 for 345 yards and 4 touchdowns, also a rushing touchdown. He was sacked 3 times, but I tell you what, he's slippery. He's slippery and he keeps his eyes up. So that'll be something to watch this week. I think Penn State can get to him, but at the same time, you've got to wrap him up. You've got to keep somebody in front of him. They'll throw it a lot. I think they're going to have to with the matchup that they have, and if they get behind, of course that's going to come. But they will also try to run it more. That's the difference from Purdue last week. You've got C.A. Bangura, DeMatha kid, who was in that backfield with Marshawn Lloyd at DeMatha, 23 carries for 114 yards last week. They'll do a lot of that zone read stuff. They'll run out of the pistol, which was a hot topic coming out of the press conference with James Franklin the other night. But I think they're going to throw it a lot. James Bostic had 6 catches for 136 yards, including a 54-yarder and a touchdown. And Sam Wiglusz, a former Ohio State walk-on, had a pair of touchdowns last week. Going to do a lot of the short passing game. Get things out in the flat. A couple of those touchdowns were scored on little dump offs and things like that. So, and then of course Tyler Walton is in the slot as well. They've got some speed, but it's nothing that Penn State shouldn't be able to handle with its secondary. I think they'll get yards. I mean, we kind of said that last week against Purdue. If they throw enough, you're going to get yards. That's just the nature of the game today. So excited to see that. And the offensive line, nothing scary. Hagen Messervy. I think that's how I said it. I think I said that correctly. At right guard is a pretty good player. Variety of looks, shotgun, pistol option. They think they got a good freshman kicker. We'll see how much we see that freshman kicker. How does Penn State match up? More athletic, better size. I mean, this is a Big Ten, a classic Big Ten versus MAC team. I wouldn't take too much away from that 3-9 record from Ohio last year, but I don't think they're world beaters and going to win the MAC by any stretch of the imagination. You keep containing the pass rush. You get to the quarterback. You keep a defensive tackle in front of them. You should be okay. Like I said, Rourke is slippery. He'll get away and he'll make you pay. He'll not so much with his legs, but he'll find somebody downfield that has broken off a route or something like that. So very important for these defensive ends. We talked about how Purdue can negate a defensive end, can negate a Mike linebacker. Important for these defensive ends to get through. And I think Chop Robinson's a guy that you look to as a potential difference maker.
Yeah. I guess the question is, are they going to have time? Right. That was the thing that was missing last week in terms of Purdue's quick game, passing the ball. Will Chop Robinson have time? Will Adisa Isaac have time? And beyond that, if you're looking at a guy who threw 34 passes last week, how much of it is just going to come back to taking advantage of some of those missed opportunities in terms of interceptions that Penn State didn't get last week that were in their hands, right? Is that going to be something that you focus on this week for Ohio?
Absolutely. I mean, you always want to make those plays, especially when you have a chance to flip it in the other direction. I know they did some nice things with the sudden change at the fumble before the half the other night, but you want to get your guys confident. You want to get your guys playing up, and I think they have the advantage there in the defensive backfield. I will say this, the linebackers need to secure tackles near the line of scrimmage, and that's both in the run and the pass game. And then you look at the tricky stuff. You're a MAC team coming into Beaver Stadium. You're going to do everything that you can to try and get on the board and try and rattle. Watch out for the throwback because they're going to try it. I mean, they're flat out going to try and catch Penn State over pursuing. They're going to go back to the other side of the field, and it's quite frankly, it's worked. So interested to see how Penn State and how Manny Diaz with this aggressive attacking defense accounts for the backside, and if Ohio tries to exploit that.
How about on the offensive side of the ball for Penn State? What does Penn State need to accomplish in this matchup?
It's a runnable game. You get physical. FAU was knocking that defensive front off I know it's an experienced defensive front, but knocking those guys off of the ball and having a little bit of success. They had a 54-yarder called back, so it was kind of, the numbers were a bit misleading. Penn State's back's obviously a little bit more explosive than the FAU group. Screen game should be there. I like the matchup for the tight ends against a linebacker. You hit a double move, you hit something like, maybe like the touchdown play to Brenton Strange last week is if something goes wrong, ditch the guy and go deep, and you've got an opportunity. I think Ohio is vulnerable to that. They gave up 38 points. I don't think this is a world-beating defense by any stretch of the imagination, and would not hate to see tempo because especially early in the game, Ohio struggled with communication. They left a wide open wide receiver with nobody within 10 yards of him for a touchdown last week. So if you want to build it up and go early, you try and run the ball with tempo. You try and get some things done, maybe slip in a screen here and there. And I think you've got an opportunity to put up a bunch of yards.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that this is the type of game where the matchups clearly, in terms of athleticism, favor Penn State, and that those provide for the opportunity to beat a guy, right? The safety that Singleton couldn't make miss, or the linebacker that Singleton couldn't make miss last week, probably misses this week, right? Or you have a better opportunity to make that guy miss. The one-on-one coverage downfield, right? Like all of those opportunities that are more difficult against Power 5 competition, should present themselves, I think, for Penn State this week. What do you got, Fitz? Who are you going with?
I'm going to go with Penn State, if you can believe it. I went 38-17. I'm still in the mix of show me some points before I give you these points. And 38,
totally.
FAU scored 38 last week, so you hope Penn State can eclipse that total. But at the same time, I mean, it's a show me type thing on offense, and I think Penn State can get to that mark and do it comfortably. But until then, I don't want to throw too many points at the wall and just hope it sticks, because this is an offense that needs to get going, needs to get something on the ground, get some. I know it's a MAC opponent, but you do get confidence by running the ball against an Ohio and trying to run up that total. We haven't seen a 100-yard rusher forever. It'd be nice to see that. So I have 38-17. I think Ohio can score some points. Penn State's defense will play a lot of guys. So does that result in some communication errors, things like that?
Sure. Yeah, we actually have the same score for Ohio.
17 points for 17 Ohio this week for some reason.
It's popular. Well, 21 feels a little bit too much, right? You don't see him moving down the field 3 times. But 17 seems reasonable. And then I do have 42. I kind of thought that for as I don't know if disjointed is the word, right? It wasn't a sterling offensive performance against Purdue, but they still put up 35 points, which to me, and how I'm kind of evaluating, engaging things moving forward for Penn State, I think should be seen as a sign of optimism to just to get it up there. I mean, they just were so inefficient last year. You
just feel so much better about just week 1 to week 1 last year, this year. I mean, I know Wisconsin is a better win, because it's Wisconsin, but you take more encouragement from the offense this year. And I know, like I said, the Clifford fatigue is a real thing, but he's a guy that drove you down at the end of the game last week and made it happen. So hopefully they can, string together. That's the thing. Watching the reactions to this is, I think so many people expect a touchdown every drive. Like I go back to that video game mentality where you're able to pour it on and make things happen from that manner. But it's just you hope to see a step in that direction. Never going to happen. Not realistic to think it should happen. But I think you move in that direction against an opponent that you should be more athletic and you should overwhelm them.
Yeah, agreed. They need to take advantage of this week, right? With Auburn on deck, and forget Auburn. Like don't worry about Auburn right now, but just maximize these games. You get this game, you get Central Michigan. Those are the 2 sub. I've been doing it from ESPN's FPI, but they're the sub 80 teams that are on the schedule, right? Beat them up. Like get those types of wins for yourself if you want to get to the goals that you have for yourselves at the end of the season. So I think that's it. Fitz. We've got number 1 in the books. We're going to do this 1,000 more times and I can't wait for everyone. So thank you so much for joining me and for doing this week. And we'll be back Saturday. Get some post game and go from there.
Yeah. Join us on the site at Blue White Illustrated on the Lions Den. A lot of stuff going on. A lot of recruiting visitors this weekend. A better list than anticipated. I know Ryan covered that on Tuesday. So looking forward to that. Check out our coverage and check out the way that we do things. I think I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to finally see. I've heard a lot of reviews of your podcasting style, so I'm excited to finally see it and go one-on-one with you here.
They hate me. Sean. It's okay though. They're gonna like me eventually.
We're gonna work on that. We're gonna work on that.
Anyway, thanks so much, and we'll see you guys very, very soon.